All right. Hello and welcome. Welcome to everyone who is on with us live, and to those of you who are watching the recording later. We are really excited about this health coaching webinar and helping you get your meal planning started. So there is a medical disclaimer. You can read it nice and thoroughly here, but we, all the information being presented is by our registered dietitians and professionals. And so, be mindful if you have any medical conditions, chronic illnesses, anything that might be contradiction to the information on here, talk to your provider specifically. Okay, so today I'd really like to introduce you all to our panelists, our speakers. We have Danielle Heuseveldt, who is a registered dietitian and national board certified health coach. Maxine Yeung, who's also a registered dietitian and national board health coach, and Alysse Anderegg, Alysse Anderegg, who is a registered dietitian and soon to be board certified health coach. So you are all in really great hands with these fabulous professionals.
And I've changed my hair color since this picture was taken, but I promise that is me in the picture. So let's talk about what's on the agenda. I'm going to kick us off. So we're going to start with the basics of nutrition, because if we're talking about meal planning and planning the way you're going to eat, it's important to know what type of information we're basing that off of. So we're going to go over very high level some of the basics of nutrition, including what are our macros, and y'all might have heard the word macros before, but we're going to go over that. We're going to go over what are the food groups and how are they the same or different than macros, and then we're going to talk about what a balanced meal can look like, which will then lead us into meal planning 101. So why would it benefit you to meal plan? How can you approach this? And then you're going to see 3 very different approaches to meal planning, because there are 3 very different individuals presenting here. And so we're going to each show you how we do meal planning, just to show you that there's different ways that you can approach this. And then, of course, we'll have time for some Q&A. So let's start with nutrition basics and a poll question for all of you. So get your poll digits ready. What macronutrient is the most important? So Chelsea's going to pull that poll up for you right now. And we'll give a little bit of time for people to get their answers in. What macronutrient is the most important? Okay, let's look at the results. Oh, so smart. This group is so smart. So it's about 23% of you said protein, but the vast majority of you said all of them. Yes, because they each do something different. So when we look at our macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, those are our main nutrient groups. And large nutrients. We do have micronutrients, which are like our vitamins and minerals, but our main nutrient groups are our large groups, or macro, is carb, protein, and fat. Carbohydrates provide energy, so that's one of their main functions, is to provide energy. And you're going to find carbohydrate in a variety of foods. Proteins help us build muscle and cells, among other things, but that's the main function. And you can find protein in a variety of foods. And then we have fat, which helps us build vitamins and hormones. And you also find that in a variety of foods. So our main nutrient groups, our big nutrient groups, are carbohydrate, protein, and fat. And they all have different functions. But we eat food. We don't eat macros per se, because very few foods just have one macro. Now, there are some, like if you look at this Venn diagram, you can see that fruit and sugar, yes, pretty much pure carbohydrate. Protein supplement and egg whites, pretty much pure protein. And not all protein supplements. A lot of protein supplements have other things in them. And we were kind of actually really hard pressed to find something that was just pure protein. And then you have your fats like oil, butter, plant-based butter, which are generally just pure fat. But everything else is a combination of macros. So that's why this conversation about macronutrients gets a little bit more nuanced, because when we start to translate that into food, you can see that there's a lot of overlap between the macronutrients in different foods. And really, what's most important is, how do you take something like this and build a meal out of it? So first, let's talk about some guidance for choices. So when we're thinking about our main large macronutrients, knowing that there is a lot of cross between macronutrients in different food groups, we want to talk about what choices are better, healthier. I know better and healthier can be sort of squishy terms, but what choices should you be making more often? When we talk about carbohydrates, we want to focus on ones that have more fiber. So these would be things like our whole grains, whole fruits, legumes, lightly cooked or raw vegetables. Why? Because we know there's a lot of benefits to including more fiber in our diet for our heart, for our gut. We can also choose carbohydrates that have a bit more protein. So you're getting both macronutrients in that particular food group. So milk and dairy is a good example of a choice that has both carbohydrate and protein. And then when we're thinking about carbohydrates, thinking about low sugar. So choosing unsweetened dairy, limiting sugary drinks and juices, limiting sweets. And it's not to say that you can't have sweets or sugar, but if you think about the balance of your food, like your budget, the majority of the time, right, with your money, you want it to go towards things that are most useful for you. And when we're thinking about high fiber choices or high protein choices versus high sugar choices, your high fiber and your high protein choices are going to give you the most value for your food dollar, right? So that's carbohydrates, and just a little bit about guidance for some of those choices. For protein, we want to steer towards lean animal or plant-based sources of protein, mainly because when we're consuming higher fat versions of animal products, it often comes along with more saturated fat and cholesterol. And in a minute, I'll tell you why that's important. But we want to steer more towards lean animal proteins or plant-based proteins. So things like lean beef or pork, skinless poultry, eggs, fish, 1 to 2%, dairy, and then plant-based being legumes, nuts, seeds, soy. Right, so those that can give you some guidance on choices for protein. And then when it comes to fat, what we know is that it should not include trans fats. The dietitians you're meeting today on the line are not of the mind that there's a no to certain foods, but trans fat is one of them, where we would all sort of unanimously say no trans fats. Now, fortunately, in the United States, trans fats were banned. So manufacturers can't use trans fats in products any longer. It's still good, though, to just look at your labels and avoid partially hydrogenated oils. That is where you'll find the trans fats. And then limiting saturated fats. So saturated fats did get a little bit of an exoneration in the past few years in terms of the role that they play in health. But what we know, especially about heart health, is that people did the best, especially those with high cholesterol levels, when they were limiting saturated fat and replacing it with unsaturated fat. So saturated fat mainly comes from animal sources. So using the leaner meats, limiting poultry skin, limiting the dairy fat, and then using butter, coconut oil judiciously can put saturated fat in the right amount in your diet, especially around cardiovascular health, so that the majority of the fat that you're using is coming from unsaturated or plant sources like nuts, seeds, a variety of plant-based oils, or things like avocado, which are going to give you unsaturated, like poly and mono unsaturated fats. So there's a little bit of guidance for choices around those three major nutrient groups, again, knowing that our foods often provide us more than one of those macronutrients. So how do you put it together then? What does this mean for getting the nutrient to something that you want to eat on your plate? Okay, another poll question for you. What is the recommended balance of food groups for a meal? So Chelsea's going to put that poll up. What do you think is the recommended balance of food groups for a meal? Okay, let's see what y'all say as you're getting your answers in. All right, so a little bit of a mixed result here, but about 45% of you have the right answer. And it was just a caveat here, and we talked a little bit about this in the medical disclaimer. The balance of the plate might look different based on certain circumstances, but for the vast majority of folks, this is sort of the right, like this is a good rule of thumb on how to balance your plate so that you're getting high nutrient and the right mix and balance of the different food groups. So making half of your plate non-starchy vegetables, and non-starchy vegetables are anything but potatoes, peas, corn. Those we would consider more starchy, and they would actually be counted within your carbohydrates. But 50% of your plate being non-starchy vegetables, 25% being carbohydrate, and then 25% being your protein, with a little bit of fat mixed in there, and of course, something to drink. And this arrangement of your plate can work with really any sort of eating style. So as we go through, right, we can see if it's more of a Hispanic meal or a South Asian meal or a Chinese meal or a vegan meal. This arrangement works. And what is this doing? Well, it's getting you more vegetables, more plants onto your plate, which is generally regarded as a good principle of nutrition. But what if your plate isn't a plate? Meaning, what if the meal that you're making is not going to fit neatly into that model? One that we hear quite often is, well, what if it's breakfast? My breakfast doesn't, it's not like salad and chicken and rice. It's different. So let's see. We have a little video to show you on what if your plate is a breakfast.
The plate model gives us general guidance on how to create a balanced meal using a variety of food groups. But what happens if your plate is an egg scramble? Let me show you. I'll be building a balanced breakfast with an egg scramble as the main course. I like to start with using whatever leftover cooked vegetables I have in the refrigerator, like roasted sweet potatoes or sauteed spinach, as the base. Next comes the protein. I typically use 2 whole eggs, which is about 15 grams depending on the size of the egg. The egg yolk contains essential nutrients such as B vitamins, choline, and folate, while the egg white contains the protein. Whole eggs can also be replaced with egg whites or tofu depending on your personal preferences. If you're out at a restaurant, look for a Greek scramble or a vegetable-based skillet on the menu. You can top off your scramble with a little healthy fat such as avocados or cheese. And if you like spice, you can always top off with your favorite hot sauce or salsa. This can be served with a slice of whole grain toast or fiber-rich fruit on the side to help you feel fuller longer. This is how you create a balanced breakfast by making a scramble.
So in the video, you can see you can do this with pretty much any meal. And we do have some resources listed at the end where you can go to see even more of those videos. Like, what if your plate is a sandwich? What if it's soup? What if it's a noodle dish? The point is we're trying to get you to eat multiple food groups at a meal. And when you arrange it like the plate, it's giving you more access to nutrients, more vegetables. Okay, so now that you have a high level overview of the basics of nutrition, let's get into meal planning and how it can help you. And I'm going to turn it over to Alysse.
Hi, everyone. We're going to do another poll. So the poll is, how much money do you spend on average eating out per week? So we'll give you guys a little bit of time to plug your answers in here. So it's a pretty even split amongst people, anywhere from $0 to $50 up to $150 plus. So thanks for putting your answers in. I'm going to start with some stats because I think food delivery apps like Grubhub, Uber Eats, and DoorDash are just really gaining in popularity. And there's really absolutely no limit to satisfying our taste buds with a click of a button. However, these services can be really expensive, especially considering the service fees, tip costs, and that's on top of the actual price of the food that we order. So the average delivery service customer is spending around $400 a month on food delivery. So that's close to $5,000 a year if we spend about the same amount every month. And about $600 of that total is just in fees. So when it comes to meal planning can help us save money. There's no tips or fees unless we get our groceries delivered, which is fine. We're also in control of how much we buy. So when we buy what we need, we can save on food costs. We can help reduce food waste. We can also save on the stress. It can be really stressful when it comes to grocery shopping without a plan, or if we don't know what we're having for dinner. So meal planning can really help with that decision paralysis when it comes to shopping, cooking, and eating. Whether we're following something more structured or something flexible, we have options throughout the week. Additionally, having that plan can ultimately save us time during the week to do things that we want to do outside of work. We can relax with our loved ones while something's cooking in the crock pot. We can get out with friends after work, knowing that we have leftovers to heat up quickly for dinner. And then lastly, of course, meal planning can be a helpful component in our health from the inside out. We have control over how we prepare our food and or what we decide to eat. And so I'll go into a little bit of the health benefits of meal planning. So there's a lot of different ways to do meal planning, and you're going to learn about a few today. But what they all have in common is that we're in control of what we plan, what we cook, and what we eat. And with that, we can tailor our meals to sync with our health needs or our goals, as well as our food preferences. A little bit of research, just background on meal planning. It has been shown to potentially help improve diet quality, which includes a higher adherence to nutrition guidelines and an increase in food variety. And as Danielle discussed earlier, each food group provides different types and amounts of our key nutrients. So having variety between and within food groups allows us to get different vitamins and minerals, different macronutrients in our diet. And it also helps keep our meals and snacks interesting with different flavors and textures. If your meal plan involves more cooking at home, we can lower the intake of some of those hidden sources of added sugar, sodium, and fat found in convenience foods or restaurant foods. Higher salt intake is associated with an increase in high blood pressure and cardiovascular events, while higher sugar intake is linked to an increased risk of fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome. So meal planning may help us prevent chronic disease and promote longevity. But even if your meal plan includes food that's not prepared by you, i.e., when we travel, when we're eating in the cafeteria, when we're going out to restaurants, that's a normal part of life. We can plan for things that are important to us. So now we get to move into meal planning and how to start, and I'm going to pass it back to Danielle.
Maxine.
I'll
take it. Let's start with another poll. We are just wondering, do any of you actually meal plan? All right, let's see what the crowd is doing. Oh, wow. Okay. So we've got a lot of people that are doing some form of meal planning, and just a few of you that have never tried it before. And for those that haven't found what works for them yet, hopefully our 3 different methods might be able to inspire a different method for yourself that you can find that works well. Okay. So what does meal planning look like? Oftentimes when the phrase meal planning comes up, this image on the left is what a lot of people have in their minds. However, we're here to tell you that it does not have to look like that. We're going to show you how to make meal planning work for you and your lifestyle. So what can meal planning actually look like? It doesn't mean that you have to plan on every single meal or snack that you're going to eat for that week. It can mean that you're just planning one meal or snack for a day, or maybe you're planning multiple meals and snacks for a few days, or maybe you actually are planning it all out for a couple weeks at a time. And your plan can include everything from foods that you're cooking, that are pre-made, that are delivered, or that you're getting from dining out. It can also include something different every day, or maybe there's a ton of leftovers in there. It really depends on your food preferences. So what we're trying to say is that meal planning just really means that you're planning ahead, and you're planning ahead for what helps you have an easier time eat consistently and also eating the way that you want to be eating. So how do you get started with meal planning? The first thing you want to do is figure out actually when can you meal plan, right? We want to schedule some time in to create this plan. And we also want to figure out when is the best time that you can food shop or order your food. And if you do plan to cook, you want to figure out when can you fit in preparing your food. So these times, they might be the same week to week, or they might vary depending on your schedule. But one of the most important things you can do is write it down to make sure that you've allotted that time and remember to do it. After figuring out when all this is going to happen, you want to consider your needs. But I have a lot more info on that on the next slide. After you figure out your needs, you just want to start filling in what those meals and snacks are going to be. Then you want to make sure that you're recording this somehow, whether you're writing it down or doing it digitally. Make sure you're adding those times to your calendar, your planner, make your list of ideas, break up how you're going to do your preparation, and definitely make your grocery list. That's going to be key for your food shopping, making sure that you're getting what you need for your plan. So meal planning does take a little bit of organization, but you'll see with our 3 methods, but that can vary quite a bit too. And then after you plan, you definitely want to review it, right? You want to make sure it makes sense for you and whoever else you're planning for. And also that it's including those different food groups and that balance that Danielle mentioned before. And then if you need to, adjust the plan. Okay. So what are those things that I was talking about that you want to consider? First, we have to figure out who are you actually planning for? Is it for yourself, your partner, your parents, your children, your friends? So many different options here. And that might be different depending on the time of day. Lunches, you might just have to think about yourself, but dinner, maybe you have to think about you and your roommates. Then you want to think about what do you need to plan for? So this means really how many snacks and meals. And keep in mind, again, you don't have to plan for all of them, just what makes sense for yourself. So I've worked with people where they'll just plan out their lunches for the week and that's it, because that's the main challenge they had. They couldn't figure out how to get lunches in consistently. And then I work with other people who plan out everything. So it really depends on who you are and what you need. We also want to think about when and where all of these meals are happening. Are they going to be at home, your work cafe, in a restaurant? Do you have planned lunch meetings where there's a catered meal already? Are you going to be at sports practice during dinner time and you need to have something on the go? Knowing what is on your agenda is going to be really important to meal planning, because meal planning doesn't mean cooking every meal, right? It's just having a plan for what are you going to eat, whether it's home cooked, prepared, provided, or from dining out. So another example of this is if you tend to eat at your work cafe or there is one, you can also scan that menu ahead of time and decide, hey, I want to eat this particular meal that day, or no, that doesn't sound good. Let me plan on bringing lunch from home. So meal planning really is all about the planning, and it's taking into consideration everything you have going on and the overall nutrition of your eating plan. Lastly, please check in with yourself after you have planned this out. We want to make sure you're feeling confident in the meal plan, and also making sure that you've planned based on what your current bandwidth is at this time, right? If you do that and it's more realistic, you have a better chance of following through with the plan. So now we're going to get to the fun part. We're going to show you the 3 different ways that each of us meal plans. And even though we're all coaches, you're going to see that we take very different approaches here.
Okay, so I think I'm starting this one off. And this kind of gives away what I'm going to talk about, but how many of you have tried a meal delivery service? So that's our poll question. Have you ever tried a meal delivery service? And we're talking about like a Blue Apron or a HelloFresh, that type of thing, where they're sending you meals to eat or assemble or cook. So let's see. Okay, interesting. So we have either a bunch that said, nope, not tried it, and some that were like, yeah, well, it wasn't for me. And then a couple who have found a right fit, some who are continuing to use it. All right, cool. Okay. So this is something that my husband and I use, and we have off and on for years. This latest one that we're using, we started using because during the pandemic, we got into a major food rut. And I just didn't have it in me to figure out how to get out of the rut. So we used a delivery service to help. And so the process that we use are we open the app and we look through the recipes and we see what's good. And we have a nightly time where we have a weekly time. So when Maxine talked about schedule your time, it's not magically going to appear. You all know that. Your life is going to rush by you and the plan's never going to happen unless you have a set time to do it. So we have a night each week where we look through the app, we pick what we want for the following week, we order, of course, the recipes that we want, and then we will make a list of any meals or recipes or things that are not included in our meal delivery, so that on the weekend we can grocery shop, get whatever else we need for the week. And so let me show you what that looks like.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and today I'm going to show you how my husband and I use a food delivery company to help us save time when we're meal planning, shopping, prepping, and cooking.
The first place where this saves us time is in planning. We don't need to think about what are we going to have, what goes with what ingredients do we need. We can just pick the recipes that we enjoy and all of the components come with it. The next place is shopping. It is just delivered to our doorstep in a climate-controlled box that is fully recyclable. So then we lay out all of our food for all of the recipes we got that week, put that away, and then we choose what we want to eat that night. In this case, we made chicken fajita tacos, and it took about 20 minutes, and we'll have leftovers for the next day. Now, there are a couple things that we needed at the grocery store, like avocado, but it greatly cuts back on our time shopping. And here are our beautiful fajita tacos that we had last night.
Okay, and let me get back into full screen here. Okay, so right, that's our process. So pretty simple. This is actually what our meals looked like last week. So we're a let's plan for all things duo. So you can see I'm cool with having the same breakfast literally for months at a time. I don't really need variety in my breakfast. So I'm a smoothie, and my husband Steve, he likes to mix it up. So he has his breakfast, and then you'll see that these were the meals that we chose for last week. I plugged them into the approximate days we were going to have them, although that can change from when we plan to the time of execution. I do plan for snacks. And then any meals that are not accounted for here. So there are a couple lunches that we needed. We will always go out to eat at least once on the weekend for brunch usually. So I just plan that in. And this is just, again, for us to know what we're going to eat through the week. So I don't have to think about it during the week. We already have all the stuff that we need. We have it all thought out. We just have to, for dinner, say, okay, which one of these things do we want to have? And then we order enough so that it gives us leftovers for lunch the next day. So we get 4 dinners and 4 lunches out of each box. Now, what are the pros and cons? The pros: less time, less energy, and for me, especially less brain power. I know there are memes all over the place that say, like, no one told you adulthood was going to be having to pick out every single thing you're going to eat for the rest of your life. And it's true. You know, it can become, you can get into a rut. It can become daunting to just think about, okay, so what are we going to have for dinner tonight? So this helps take some of that away from you. And that there is usually less food waste because you're just getting what you need. The cons are financial, or cost. Although I would say if you're relying on things like DoorDash or eating out, might be equivalent. And for us, it was equivalent to our grocery costs. So it might have been a little bit more expensive, but it was more expensive in a way that we were willing to pay because we were willing to pay for that time and brain power back. Now, a couple tips on using a delivery service. There's an abundance. So shop around. And they will offer you deals. They'll often offer you like a free first order. Take advantage of that. And then if you sign up for one and then you quit, they will try to get you back with some deals. So if you're okay playing the game, do it, because you can try a bunch, usually at a lower cost, decide what you like. So shop around, and then consider price. Consider the level of prep involved, because there are so many. There is a ton, from you just heat it and eat it to easy assembly to ones that are a little bit more involved. So consider how much prep work you want to put into it, and then consider what cuisines are offered, right? Do they match your preference? Do they match your health needs? So those are all things to think about. And then definitely set a reminder for you to cancel or edit your subscription each week, because otherwise you'll get maybe things you didn't want, or you'll be out of town and a box will be delivered. But make sure you are setting a reminder or a calendar invite to edit your box, because I've been on the receiving end of getting a box that I did not edit, and it was a little hit or miss. Okay, so that's using a meal delivery service. I'm showing you this. This is a handout that we often give out to folks who are contemplating meal delivery, just to show you how many options there are. And this is just a small smattering of the options that are out there. And a lot of them are regional. So you might want to check in your area what types of delivery services are available. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it back over to Alysse, and she's going to talk to you about her method of meal planning.
Yes, welcome to meal planning from scratch. This is my preferred method of meal planning. I happen to have a lot of food intolerances, so meal planning from scratch really helps me account for those types of things when I plan for meals and snacks from week to week. So my process, I really always start with figuring out what I have at home that I might want to use up before it goes bad, or whatever the case may be. And then I always ask myself what sounds good. I think this is a really just highlight number 2. That's the most important. I really want to look forward to my meals while also thinking about how to nourish my body best for the week. And then after I figure out what I want and what I have, I consider my schedule for the week, what nights are best for cooking. For me, most weeks, my schedule is lighter on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I really prefer to cook more time-consuming meals on those days. And then on my busier days, we either have leftovers or I recruit my partner, Jason, to take the lead on those nights when I have less time. And then lastly, I go and look for inspiration. So here's a video of what my meal planning looks like. I start off meal planning each week with figuring out what I have and what I want. Then I go searching for inspiration, i.e. Pinterest, usually sticking with 1 or 2 recipes I've made before that I know I like, and 1 new recipe to try. After consulting with my partner Jason, we decided on 1 new recipe, salmon with rice, one of my favorites, hot chicken chili, and my mom's slow cooker roasted noodles. All 3 recipes call for some ingredients we already have at home. Once I know what I'm making and what I have at home, I add what I need into Any List, a great grocery shopping app that Jason and I can both add to throughout the week to stay organized. I'll also add in some staple items for breakfast, lunches, and other odds and ends we need to pick up, like fruit, eggs, bread, etc. Now I have a tentative meal plan for the week. I have 3 options for dinner with some backup easy meals, brunch, and Trader Joe's frozen items. A plan for lunch, I'll be having dinner leftovers, and Jason will have tuna sandwiches. And I know which nights Jason or I will be cooking. This week we got most of our groceries at Trader Joe's, with the exception of the salmon and roast found at our seafood and meat market. We picked up some additional items that we could easily turn into a quick lunch or dinner if needed. And this week we actually ended up making a couple of those easy meals because things got busy. We did the majority of our big cooking on the weekends, and we're left with plenty of leftovers for dinner and lunches throughout the work week. So I just took a screenshot of what you saw in that video. On this particular week, I had ground chicken as a protein food, so that sparked an idea to make hot chicken chili, which is one of my favorites. And then we had rice, so we incorporated that into choosing a seafood recipe. So that was our new recipe for the week. And then lastly, I chose another recipe that I've made many times, and it was a crock pot meal. So it was really easy to throw in midday to have ready by the evening. So slow cooker recipes are awesome to incorporate throughout the week, even on a busy work day. We had a plan for 3 dinners to cook from scratch, and I had a plan for some backup easy meals, and we honestly ended up using the majority of those easy meals during the work week, and we did the bigger meals on the weekends when we had more time. So it's always really good to have a plan B when things get busy. I had plenty of dinner leftovers to heat up for lunch, and Jason loved his tuna sandwiches that week. And breakfast for us was fairly easy. Jason's really into smoothies right now, so that's what he did. I typically just do eggs and maybe some fruit. And then I got a variety of snack options. You'll see there that I typically will choose a protein or fat, and then I'll just pair it with a carb that I have on hand for balance. So moving on, pros, cons, tips. Meal planning from scratch is my preferred method because I love control. With this method, you can customize your meal plan to fit your preferences. I love repetition for certain meals like breakfast and dinner. I like to mix it up. So it's a really good opportunity to switch it up from week to week, try new foods, new recipes from books, blogs, social media, all of the TikTok hacks. You also have control over how much you're making, so you can save on food waste if you're someone that doesn't love leftovers. Or if you're someone like me, you can double the recipe and have lunch for the whole week. I love leftovers, so usually I make more than a recipe calls for. Cons, this method does require more time and energy up front. You do the planning, the shopping, the cooking yourself, but don't be afraid to get your spouse or kids involved to plan and shop and cook, because it really does take a village, and the longer you do it for, the easier it gets too. So I think just continuing to experiment is good as well. And then lastly, some tips to make all of this easier. Just to recap what I've mentioned before, choose a couple of recipes that you've cooked before that you know are good and you know how to make them. Use what you have already in the pantry or the freezer. Let that be an inspiration for what to cook. And I cannot stress this enough. Always ask yourself what sounds good. We are more likely to cook and look forward to cooking if we're excited about what we're making and what we're about to eat. And then lastly, plan for things to not go as planned. Weeks get busy, so have a backup. Grab some convenience items at the store that you can turn into a meal, like a frozen pizza and a salad kit. That's one of my go-tos. And then just to reiterate, the app that I use for meal planning and grocery lists to stay organized is AnyList. There are lots of apps out there, so if that's a great way for you to stay organized, download something like that, so you can add your grocery items throughout the week. And then Maxine's going to talk about her method.
Mm-hmm. So I meal plan too, but I do it with a little bit less structure than Danielle and Alysse. So what works for me in my home is I have a general plan, but not a very strict or involved plan, meaning that I do think ahead for the week, but I don't necessarily pick out recipes or decide what I'm eating before I go grocery shopping. And I know that might sound completely opposite of whatever you might have learned about meal planning in the past. So for me, my breakfast and snack options are pretty much the same week to week. That makes it a little bit easier. And my pantry is really well stocked. I've got tons of different carbohydrate sources like grains and pastas, lots of condiments like different types of tomato or pesto sauces, things like that. It's my dinners that I'm mostly planning for. And so for me, when I am choosing my protein and vegetable sections, I'm really doing it on a whim when I'm shopping. It's after I shop, I kind of look at everything that I purchased and I put things together, things that sound good to me. I write all of this down, but I'm not necessarily assigning a particular meal to a particular day. I'm just simply writing down my ideas for the week and I have a list to pull from. So let's watch my video and you can see how this works in more detail.
Come along as I show you how I meal plan, but with a lot less structure than you might imagine. First, I look around to see what I already have on hand in the fridge, freezer, and pantry, and I jot those items down. I like to use magnetic whiteboard on my fridge so that my meal plan is front and center in the kitchen. Then I fill in any meals that are already planned for, like a lunch meeting, pizza Fridays, dinner at my sister's, and I mostly only plan dinners because I cook enough for lunch leftovers. And now I know that I need about 4 proteins and veggies to go along with them. Instead of planning recipes, I like to be inspired while I shop. I scan the produce section first and pick up what stands out to me, and oftentimes these are seasonal sale items, and I do the same with the animal or vegetarian proteins. Here are my selections. I also make sure to pick up any staples that are running low, and now I'm ready to head home to continue planning. I lay out all the groceries, and then I start to pair them based on what sounds good, combination-wise, with textures and flavors, and here's what I've settled on for now. The final step is to write all of this down. I start by listing our usual rotation and breakfast ideas, I add in the snacks, and then I fill in dinners with the meal combos and any paired pantry items. I make sure to put foods that spoil quicker towards the earlier part of the week, and now I've basically got my guide of what meals are possible based on what we have. As the week goes on, I choose what to make for breakfast and dinner based on what sounds satisfying that day, and also based on how much time and energy I have. If I end up using a meal that's on another day, I just erase it and rewrite what we actually ate. This helps us know how long the leftovers have been in the fridge too. And that's how I meal plan, but with a bit less structure.
Yeah. So here is a close-up of my menu. And you can see that I've put in the scheduled meals, my go-to breakfast and snacks, those dinner combos, but I added in carbs to the protein and veggies that I had in the pantry. And then for lunch, I just kind of put in stuff that we had. There was a leftover bag salad from the week before. I put that earlier toward the week because it needed to be eaten. I had some frozen soups. And then you can see in the later part of the week, it's mostly leftovers from the dinners. And then on the side, I've just got, that list of extra items in case I decide to go off plan. Okay, so the biggest pro to this type of planning is that it can be done really quickly. And it's really flexible. Since you're not tied to any ingredients, you can just be inspired while you're shopping, and you can actually really, take advantage of deals and sales, and it can probably save quite a bit of money when you're doing it that way versus trying to get particular ingredients you decided on before. And then for me, what's most important is it supports my intuitive eating. So even though I'm planning ahead, I still have some flexibility in choosing what sounds satisfying to me the day of versus saying, okay, well, I have to make this certain meal on a certain day. And so I really like that part of it. I do put it down on, that schedule that you saw, but it's, for me, I know that I can move things around if I want. The biggest con though is that it's not very structured, right? And so there aren't necessarily recipes to follow, meaning that if you're not confident in the kitchen, you might feel a little bit lost on how to randomly put together a meal and this method might feel a little bit scary. But of course, you can always find recipes based on the ingredients that you purchase too after the fact. I also want to point out that I'm not a fancy cook by any means. I am a super simple cook. I love the one pot, one cheap tray meals, and I don't do a lot of meal prep either, which is that prepping ahead of time. What I do is what's called batch cooking, and that's cooking many portions at once, either to have leftovers or to freeze for the future. So for instance, what this can look like is I will purchase many chicken breasts and I'll season half of them with one flavor combination, the other half with a completely different seasoning, and then I'll cook it all together. But now I have variety, but I only had to cook once, but I have stuff for 2 different chicken recipes, right? So I'll also do the same with something like grains or pasta and use those with multiple meals. This saves me time, it gives me variety, and it helps for this type of planning in particular to make sure that it doesn't get too repetitive, especially if you might find yourself kind of grabbing the same things over and over again on a whim. So I've mentioned most of the tips already, but if you're interested in trying out this way of planning, but you're worried about the cooking without recipes, I really would emphasize starting with recipes that you're familiar with already, that you don't even need to look at, something that you've made a few times and tastes well and fits your needs. Lastly, the last part of this is with this loose structure, make sure you keep in mind how fast certain foods might spoil that you're picking up. So for example, if I'm buying fish, I'm going to cook it within the next 2 or 3 days versus something like tofu, which I know can last longer. Maybe I'll think about having that later in the week. And if I don't use it, it can even be used the next week or 2. Okay, so what are our kind of best tips for you here with meal planning is basically just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't need to be complicated. If you're just getting into this, start with one time a day, a few days at a time, get used to it, and you can build upon it. And one tip I like to suggest is start with the meal or snack that you find most challenging to have consistently, because then you're working on meeting your nutrition needs too, which gives you the energy, gives you the confidence, right, to continue with meal planning. Secondly, stay stocked. Have your pantry and your freezer items stocked, a variety of grains, frozen fruits, frozen vegetables, frozen proteins. This way you always have something on hand, those easy meals like Alysse was mentioning, or maybe you need to supplement a meal if something went wrong, especially if you need to improvise. This is a great thing to do. And then we can't emphasize it enough, but just make it easier on yourself if possible. I know it can sound overwhelming, but there are a few tips here that I'll tell you about that can make it a little bit easier. So for instance, if you want that home cooked meal, but you have little time or energy, that's probably one of the biggest things that I hear from people. Consider the batch cooking or consider using those prepared items like the pre-cut veggies, the pre-marinated meats. It'll just save time. Maybe even try a theme night, something like a meatless Monday, a taco Tuesday, a pizza Friday. This can really help simplify your planning week to week because you already have some expectations set. You have a bit of a guide and you're not starting completely from scratch. And then try getting others involved if possible. Get their input on what to think so you don't have to do all the brain work there, and then delegate the shopping, the cooking, the chopping, the cleaning, anything possible. And then when it comes to cooking, try to avoid catering. That's what takes up time and makes cooking a little more overwhelming too. So basically this means don't try to cook something different for everybody in your house. Try to think about meals that mostly satisfy everyone's needs and just require minimal adjustments. So an example is I've got 2 really tiny kids at home. They don't like seasoning or sauces or anything like that. So if I'm making chicken, I'll leave some of it without the extra seasoning. And then basically that's ready for them while I move on and do the rest of whatever I am cooking, right? But I haven't necessarily cooked a whole new meal for them. And then what will really, really help you save time in the future is just take notes. What worked, what didn't? Did you find a recipe you loved? Great, save it. Did you find that something took longer than expected? Make a note so next time you allot the time for that. And then reuse what you have. If you found a menu that really worked well, save it, pull it out again later. Over time, you're going to create this library of prepared plans that you have, and you don't have to start from scratch all the time. And then lastly, just be flexible. I think this has been mentioned a few times, but we can plan the best that we try, and that's really the goal, but life happens, a meeting can go long, you end up dining out, you get sick. That's probably the biggest thing I've been hearing this past month is just all the illnesses from winter time. Also, food might spoil sooner, right? So if meal planning doesn't necessarily work the way you expect it to, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for you, right? It just means that sometimes things happen, but also maybe we consider trying a different approach, right? I think 13% of you had said you just hadn't found what worked for you. And so hopefully today there are a few more ideas out there and other ways to approach the meal planning. So they're essentially our guides to just help us eat more consistently and eat the way we want to. So now I'm going to pass it back to Danielle because she's got a few more tips that are budget specific.
Right. So sometimes it can seem overwhelming to meal plan because there might be financial implications, but really planning can help with that. Because if you're planning what you're going to eat or where you're going, no matter what setting, you also can plan for the financial piece of that. And so a couple additional things to think about, especially as it applies to shopping, is consider buying in bulk for things that are okay in bulk, and visiting your grocery store's bulk section, because oftentimes it's going to be cheaper to buy things like maybe nuts or rice or things there in the bulk section than other areas. Buy the store brand. It is the same, folks. It is the same as the name brand. Buy the store brand. It's cheaper. Make the plan and use what you have each week, right? So if you already have a bottle of soy sauce in your pantry, don't go buy another bottle of soy sauce, right? Inventory what you have and use what you have. That's going to help save you money in the long run. Buy fruits and vegetables that are in season. And if you're able to, buying local oftentimes can come with some cost reduction. Buy things that you can keep longer. I hear from a lot of folks that they're hesitant to use things like frozen vegetables or canned vegetables because somehow they think it's less healthy. It really isn't. I mean, sometimes with canned, we can talk about the sodium content, but they keep for a long time. And so you don't have to use them right away. And so sometimes that can also help us save on cost. Eggs and milk, although eggs maybe in the past several months have not been on the more cost-effective side, but usually they are, and they are high nutrient. So they can be a good thing to add in for protein, healthy fats, and vitamins and minerals in a more cost-effective way. You can find that also with dairy. Use your freezer. Again, frozen's a great way to be able to buy some things in bulk, not have to use it right away. Again, have a plan, shop sales. And if you have a plan, it's easier to do that because you can clip coupons, you can look around at different stores, what's on sale, to help save money. And then if you're able to, and you're in a place where you can also try growing your own fruits and vegetables, because that absolutely can save you money. Again, that's not for everybody, but for those of you who like that, it can be a money saver. So the bottom line of this presentation today is that there's no one right way to go about this. Meal planning is to benefit you, to save time, energy, money, all those things that we mentioned in the benefits. And it's a guide, and there's no way to do it wrong. There's no failure here. So we want you to know that it should be flexible and it should be to your benefit, and that it doesn't have to look like maybe what you have seen it look like in other places. It actually doesn't even have to look like the 3 examples we gave you today. The idea, though, is having a plan, thinking ahead of time about how you are going to feed yourself. You can get those benefits even when maybe it's just eating outside food or it's eating all home-cooked foods. The idea is the benefit is in the plan. So we hope you enjoyed this today. We're going to go on to do a little bit of the Q&A. We have a couple minutes. So let's take a look at some of these. Okay. So we have a question here. Are fresh pressed juices considered sugary drinks, or can they fall into the whole fruit category? So they don't actually fall into the whole fruit category, because when you are juicing, you're taking the fiber out, right? But I would say fresh pressed juice can be part of a balanced diet. We wouldn't consider it a whole fruit because you're removing the fiber. And it is going to give you more sugar, but including some fresh juices in your diet can be part of the overall balance. Okay, we mentioned 1 to 2% milk fat as a more desirable option. Are skim options okay as well? Yes, they are. And really, the dairy choices might depend on a lot of things like cardiovascular risk, high cholesterol levels, preference. So definitely skim milk can absolutely be a choice. And even for some, sometimes full fat can be a choice that is necessary as well. And are there any benefits to lower milk fat dairy options over plant-based milks? That is an excellent question, probably a little bit more in depth than what we can go to here. But I would say there are pros and cons to all of them. It just really depends on your circumstances, your preferences, what you got going on in your health history. Alysse, Maxine, what would you say about that? Do you feel that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, if you have food intolerances and you don't tolerate dairy, plant-based milks are a great secondary option. A lot of them are fortified, sometimes even with protein. Some are, they're fortified with calcium, so you can still get nutrients there, but don't be afraid to do dairy as well, because there are a lot of really great nutrients in milk. They are, they have fat, they have carbs, they have protein, so they're balanced macronutrient wise, and they are just full of vitamins and minerals. So there's no wrong answer. Both are fine.
Yeah. The next question is about the demonization of saturated fat. Yes, definitely that did happen in the 90s. Yes. And that there may be benefits to grass-fed meat and butter, and having saturated fat from, again, those sources may have some additional health benefits. And while that is true, it does not take away from the fact that the majority of our fat really should be from those plant sources like olive oil, avocado oil. So you want a good fat mix where unsaturated fat is really the majority of the fat you're consuming. The question goes on to ask, would you say seeking out organic food in general and also grass-fed meat and butter is something folks should prioritize? That's going to be different for everybody. With organic, I would say access to the items is eating your fruits and vegetables is most important. Like organic, not organic, eating your fruits and vegetables are going to be the thing to prioritize. And the whole conversation around buying organic or not, grass-fed or not, that is a very nuanced conversation that again is probably we might have with the individual based on their circumstances. But I would say eating your fruits and vegetables and eating a balanced diet is a priority. That is the priority, whether or not it is organic. Alysse, Maxine, any thoughts on that question?
I think we need to do a whole presentation on the
Yeah.
nuance of eating organic.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah.
such a complicated question to answer, but generally no, it doesn't equivalate to it. It's better for us or our health.
Yeah. Right. What are the delivery services you recommend? Again, based on preference, there's a whole bunch of options out there, and I've tried a bunch of them. So I wouldn't say that I like only these are approved. It really depends on what you are looking for in terms of cost, prep, foods offered. Does Danielle only have one snack of Cheerios a day? I go from toddler snack, which is I love Cheerios. So I do Cheerios. And then I also do smoked trout and crackers. So I oscillate between those. What did you have for dinner last night? Okay, I'll go first. My husband and I went out for sushi and it was delicious.
Okay.
Maxine, what did y'all have for dinner last night?
Yeah, well, great. This is a perfect example. So I knew it would be busy, so I had one of those kind of like pre-made meats that were it was marinated and cooked already, and all I had to do was put it in a pan and heat it up. And then there was a stir-fry veggie kit. And so I picked up those two from the store, and then I just made some noodles that we had on hand for a little bit of a Korean style barbecue beef veggie bowl.
Okay, I got knee deep in this new thing I was trying to do. I made short ribs, which is complicated process, in the oven to go on nachos. So last night I had nachos. It was complex, but they turned out so good. I mixed in lots of veggies in there. The short ribs were so good, amazing once I finally got them cooked right. So yeah, it took a lot longer than I thought.
We have a question on getting enough protein. I've heard the recommended protein is 1 gram per pound of body mass. Again, that varies from person to person, but usually don't get close to that. Is this too much? Again, it can vary person to person based on health needs, levels of exercise, types of exercise that you're doing. So we can't necessarily comment on that per se, because it can vary from person to person. But I will say inclusion of protein at each meal and snack can be really helpful. And for those that do have a higher amount of protein needed, sometimes that's where consulting with a dietitian or a health coach can be helpful, because we can help you strategize for how to get the protein that you do need. And then, is oat milk more healthy? I think we sort of touched on that a little bit with the plant-based versus not. And again, I know we're probably going to sound a little bit like broken records, but it depends. It depends on the person who's consuming it, right? Like for me, I'm lactose intolerant. So I can do a lactose-free dairy milk, and then I can do a plant milk. So for me, I do like oat milk because I think it froths the best of all of the plant-based alternatives. But right, so for me, yeah, I would say probably I'd put oat milk in my healthy category because it doesn't have lactose and it doesn't make my tummy hurt. But so it is going to be, I think, different from person to person, and it's also going to vary product to product. Some might have more added sugars than others. So again, it's kind of it gets nuanced. Maxine, Alysse, commenting
Yeah,
on that last question.
especially with oat milk, it's a little bit different than, say, the nut milks like almond milk, because it's made with a grain, right? So generally, oat milk is going to have more carbohydrates per serving. So if you are someone that needs to, think about how many carbs you're having, if you're, managing your blood sugar levels, oat milk may not be the best choice, but it could be, right? It depends, are you putting in a splash in your coffee? Are you having a big bowl of cereal with it? So this is complicated to answer, but that's what we're here for, to dive deeper. Um, if these are questions that you have about your own particular health needs, we can definitely help you figure that out. But
Yeah,
it's hard for us to say like it is or it is not more healthy. It really depends on yourself.
right. With a lot of these questions, and we know why you're answering that, or why you're asking them, because there's a lot of information and misinformation, and there's a lot of people trying to give you information with a definitive perspective, like nobody should eat this or everybody should eat this. And the fact of the matter is that's just not the case. It's really about the individual, what their needs are, what their circumstances are, what their access is. Like so much needs to go into being able to answer those questions, that very rarely do we come up with a question where the answer isn't, well, it kind of depends, which I know doesn't help when you're asking questions in a forum like this, but that is where come to see a health coach or a dietitian, because we really can. We want to get to know you. We want to get to know your life. We want to get to know what is going on for you so that we can help you sort through the information out there and help you make the best choice based on your individual needs. And I know we're over time. Go ahead,
One
Maxine.
last thing on that too is, let's say it was more healthy. If you don't like it though, there's no benefit, right?
That's
to
right.
eating it. And so you may hear all of these things. Honestly, when I hear someone saying these definitive rules, to me that's a red flag that they don't necessarily know what they're talking about or don't have all the information. And so, we're not going to say like you definitely have to have this. There's so many different types of foods out there that you can definitely have a well-balanced diet, right, without necessarily having to eat these foods that we're hearing about that are supposedly going to make us very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a couple of questions on that too. Like one person mentioned, I've heard a lot about AG1. That is, it's out there in social media. And so something like that, you know, the benefits are, it sort of kind of acts like a multivitamin. So discuss with your health coach, discuss with your provider. Like there's lots of things that we can try out there. And we had another question about someone looking for recipes, and the recipes always include foods they don't like.
Oh, yes.
Don't be afraid to sub in something that you know you do like or that would fit well with that recipe. Be flexible, and if you're comfortable getting creative in the kitchen, make substitutions. I make substitutions all the time.
All right.
I think that it is time for us to say goodbye. Thank you so much to our wonderful providers here for coming on, for creating and sharing all of this amazing content with us. And you can schedule appointments with them, reach out to them or other health coaches by logging in, create your account. If you already have an account, you can go ahead and log in and start combing through the resources that we have for you there. Anything you guys want to share before we sign off?
No, great questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.